Hey everybody, and welcome to another ranking video. So in this series I take a look at the last 10 new to me board games and I rank them from my least favourite up to my most favourite. Now these 10 games are games that me and my games group acquired during the UK Games Expo, so they're all freshly played. Now before I get started on the 10 games, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in my show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 10 I have Radlands. So this is a 2-player only kind of head-to-head dueling style game as you are building 3 columns in front of you of cards, starting off from a base, and then essentially you are trying to eliminate all 3 of your opponent's bases. If you do that, you'll be the winner. You're doing things by playing cards. You can either kind of pay water, which is quite a tight resource, in order to play these cards out and use the abilities, or you can kind of use the cards as a throwaway or discard the cards straight away to get an instant ability. Now these styles of games generally aren't for me, but this one did quite a good job of making it feel, concise, I suppose. Resources were very tight in this game, and it became quite a cutthroat game, I suppose. And it did do a good job of keeping the gameplay feel like it's moving with a forward momentum, because you play these event cards and every round they would just passively move forward and eventually something big would happen as it reached a certain point in these columns, or these rows I suppose. I do feel like the game felt a little bit stagnant at times, as you would maybe attack your opponent by using all your resources and then they'd use theirs to heal it back up and so on. It'd be back and forth until an event would trigger. So sometimes it did feel a little bit rigid and a little bit, again, stagnant. But generally, I can see why people like it. The artwork is absolutely stellar, but not quite my style of game. At number 9, I have Rescuing Robin Hood. Now this is a cooperative deck building, push your luck game, as you are managing this hand of characters, trying to total up these different skill points. Basically the game has 3 different push your luck mechanisms, and you're trying to kind of fight through these rows of enemy characters in order to unlock better cards into your deck. The 3 different push your luck mechanisms are very similar. You've got ones where you are simply flipping over a card at a time, trying to stay below the limit of this strength on your character cards. One where you can claim an amount of character cards or enemy cards that you can flip over at once and hopefully stay under. Or one where you can try and take on the whole row of cards, and again, if your limit is above that limit, then you'll win. So basically you've got 3 different levels of risk, I suppose, in relation to how these push your luck mechanisms work. I thought the game was okay at best, but I definitely feel this is a one-trick pony. It feels like once you beat this game, you've really got no reason to go back to it anymore. The decisions were very obvious. If you've got a bunch of certain type of symbol, you probably just want to keep on adding to that one. It did have a little bit of a twist where you could kind of pass on skills to your opponent and hopefully boost their points and work together that way. But ultimately, again, the decision space was very small, and again, pretty much no incentive to come back to this one after you've played it the 1 or 2 times. So yeah, I thought for longevity this game really didn't cut the mustard, so I can't really recommend it for that reason. At number 8 I have Paper Dungeons. Now this is a roll and write dungeon crawling game, as you are trying to navigate your way through this maze, trying to fight enemies, trying to discover treasure, fight bosses, etc. All the stuff you'd expect from a dungeon crawler. I always find it quite fascinating how much of a game these designers can compact down into just a sheet of paper, a pencil and a few dice. So I definitely think in terms of the achievement of how much game is packed into this box is quite well done. It has a lot of the tropes you'd like, getting better equipment, leveling up your characters, all these different things. So not really much negative to say about this one. I thought it did quite a good job, maybe a little bit too long, but I would play it again. A lot of the stuff in this game I've seen before, but it's kind of repackaged in this well-fitted dungeon crawling theme. But yeah, I suppose in the grand scheme of things, it's another roll and write game that doesn't feel particularly special, but it does a good job at what it does. At number 7, I have Treasure Island. Now this is a deduction style game, as you are trying to find where the treasure is secretly buried somewhere on this rather beautiful looking map. One player is going to be the kind of games master who knows where the treasure is buried, and they're going to be giving clues to the players to try and help them narrow down where that treasure could possibly be. The action system is actually very simple. You're either moving your character and doing a small search, or you are kind of doing larger searches with a bigger radius, I suppose, and even using these special abilities to help you narrow it down further. I think this game did a fantastic job of making it feel immersive, because you are, literally writing on the board where it could be. You're scribbling off big portions as you're revealing more and more information, and it does have a real kind of gold rush feel to it as you are kind of running around trying to dig places and search. If your opponent's looking somewhere, it might make you feel a bit paranoid, so you want to go search near where they are. So I was actually pleasantly surprised with this one, and I enjoyed the role of being the actual treasure hunter rather than the games master style character. And I think if I was to play it again, I'd probably prefer to stay in that same position. So way better than I thought this was going to be. Some little bit of rules ambiguity of where the treasure could be, because with deduction games you want them to be precise, whereas this one, because the map is so huge and there are so many different ways to discover information, there can be a little bit of ambiguity of if that treasure could be in a certain location or not, which could potentially mess up the game. But that did not happen in this game that I've played. So maybe I'm being a bit paranoid and thinking ahead. But the gameplay itself was really fun, and I'd happily play this one again. At number 6, I have Almond Ray. So quite rare that a Knizia auction game is this far down on my rankings, but this is a strong episode, to be fair. And I did like a lot about this game. I like this idea of the bidding mechanism, where if you are outbid on a location, then you have to bid somewhere else, which makes the weight of your bidding much more important. And I love this mechanism where halfway through the game, you kind of lose claim over these different regions, meaning that you have to rebid for them to reclaim them, but that's going to come with a bit more of a premium because there's already a points infrastructure embedded on those locations. I actually really like that mechanism. The rest of it I thought was fine. I didn't like the luck of the card draws, because sometimes you would get these kind of missions or endgame missions that don't really suit what you've got, but sometimes those card draws can be really powerful and give you a ton of money, which is obviously infinitely useful. So I thought that bit was a little bit outdated. It didn't quite sit right for me. It's a solid game. I'd rate it a 6.5 out of 10, but I don't think it quite holds up to the other Knizia bidding games, such as High Society, Ra, Medici, and some others as well. So I know this is well regarded. I know it's kind of considered part of that auction series of games by Knizia, but I think this is the weakest one for me personally. At number 5, I have Manila, which is kind of a betting and wagering style game, as you are rolling these dice and moving up these kind of barges up this river. If it gets to a certain point on that river, or passes a certain point, then it's going to finish essentially, or some are going to be left behind and not finish, and you're betting on these different things. So you're betting on how many boats are going to finish, how many are not going to finish, whether particular boats are going to finish. Earlier in the game, you're going to have less information, so if you bet on a certain boat, it means you're going to get more money if it finishes, etc. So I think if you like games like Camel Up, you'll probably like this one. There's some real moments of highs and lows, as things, or kind of wild bids will pay off or they won't, and it just works quite well for what it does. I think maybe it can go a little bit too long if the game plays out a certain way, but I enjoyed it quite a lot, and I'm quite excited to see it some more and play it at those higher player counts, because I played it at 3 players. I think it might be better at the higher player count. So I like this one. I'm quite excited to play it some more. That is Manila at number 5. At number 4, I have Rome in a Day. So this is kind of brand new by Alley Cat Games. Kind of had a soft launch at the UK Games Expo. This is a kind of a simultaneous I split you choose style game, as you are given these tiles, or you're drawing these tiles, and sometimes buildings go on these tiles, and the aim of the game is to try and get these buildings matching these locations surrounding them. But the way you divide these buildings out is through that I split you choose mechanism, where you are secretly kind of splitting these different tiles off in different groups, and then offering them to your opponents, and they can either choose the bigger group or the smaller group. Now, of course, you want to be quite clever as the player dividing them up to try and get the perfect balance to not give your opponent what they want, as well as keeping back what you want for yourself, for your own little tableau. I like this way that you are incentivized to take the lower group because you get these gems, which can give you some pretty significant end-game scoring. And I really liked how rapid this game worked. It's literally 4 rounds, so you can get this played in around 20 minutes. And that's quite a rare thing for me to say, but I think this game did a great job of keeping it simple, because the whole crux of the game here is that I split you choose mechanism, and not so much in the placement of the tiles. There's a little bit of a puzzle there, but nothing too taxing. And I think if they made that too gamey, I think that could have actually hurt the game rather than help it. So I definitely think they struck that perfect chord on the complexity level here to keep it accessible, but still thinking about how you want to divide these tiles up. So this one is right on the cusp of a recommendation for me. I have only played it the once, and it was at 2 players. I think it would be better with more players. So, my final judgment is up in the air at the moment. I think if I play it a few more times, it could slip into that recommendation territory. And this game, it fits that perfect niche on my shelf where this is a game that I'd play anytime, anywhere. I can never really see anybody not enjoying this. It's quick, it has enough decisions to be interesting. And yeah, those kind of games for me are evergreens in my collection and will stay for the long haul. So that is Rome in a Day at number 4. At number 3, I have Finca. Now, this is another game that is right on the cusp of a commendation, and with more players, it could very easily fall into a commendation. This is a pretty simple, accessible Euro, almost contract fulfillment game as you're collecting these fruits through this rondel system and completing these contracts to get points, essentially. Now, the rondel mechanism for me is really interesting. It is very tactical, but I do like the way it works, as you have your meeples on the rondel. Depending on how many meeples of any player is on that particular blade of the rondel will show how many spaces you can move. So if 2 players were on a particular spot, then you'd move two spaces. And additionally, if you land on a space, the amount of, or the yield of the fruits you're getting depends on the amount of people there. So if there's 3 players on the place you've just landed, then you're going to get 3 fruit. And then optionally, when you cross these certain points on the rondel, you'll get these donkey tokens, which will let you cash in your fruit in order to complete these contracts. This game has an amazing tempo to it. It really does feel like boom, boom, boom. You're taking your turns rapidly. Always feels like you are achieving lots and getting loads of points in kind of different ways, because you can fulfill many orders at once. So it's very satisfying when you can complete several orders in one turn. And it also had a few additional twists which took it above and beyond what I thought it was going to be. The first of which is a little bit nasty at times, where if you gain a certain amount of fruit and there's not enough in the supply, then everybody is forced to discard that type of fruit that they're hoarding. So you can actually use that against your opponent if you know that they've got a ton of fruit that they're not spending. You can force them to get rid of it. And the second one is that when you finish a stack of these contracts, then there's a remaining piece available there. And if you have the most of that type of fruit collected, then you'll also get these additional points. And that meant that you have to pace yourself in different ways. Think, I could do that contract, but if I do that one, then my opponent's going to get the bonus reward because they have the most of that type of fruit. So it does have some layers here, amongst other things that I've not even mentioned. So I'm pretty sure this will probably end up being a commendation, because it is just a really pleasant game, despite having these little bits of nastiness or a little bit of tastiness there. But yeah, I liked it quite a lot. So that is Finca at number 3. Okay, so 2 commendations this episode. The first of which, at number 2, is Alhambra. Alhambra, considered one of the great accessible Euros from 20 years or so ago. This one is a simple tile placement game, as you are spending these, I think there's 4 different types of currency cards in order to acquire these tiles. You're building out a tableau or a city in front of you with some restrictions, so you have to always be able to trace the tile you're placing back to this fountain piece, and you have to match kind of pavements with pavements and walls with walls. And these walls are useful because if you kind of surround your location, you're going to get some bonus points there. So there are kind of layers to the puzzle here. Which type of tiles do you want, because you're going to get majorities at certain points in the game. You've got to try and match these walls up. You've got to make sure it fits your puzzle. You've got to make sure you have the right currency cards, which you're drafting at the start of each round. And it just has a real breezy, fun, but slightly thinky feel to it. Again, fast pace, just picking up cards, buying tiles, and so on. And good competition for these majorities as well. So definitely a well-rounded, pure style game that's definitely going to hold up well. I have only played the base game and base game only, and I know there is a ton of expansion material for this one. So if you guys are familiar with Alhambra, I'd be interested in hearing what you think, which expansions are the best for this one, because I don't want to make it too muddy and too complex to steer away from what this game, how this game thrives. But I would be interested in maybe adding a little bit of spiciness into the game. So that is Alhambra at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have World Exchanges. So this is a pretty simple economic style game that feels very different to anything else out there, as you are plotting at this graph essentially to monitor your cash. But as you are buying and spending these different location cards, you have to either reduce your cash line if you're buying, or increase it if you're selling. And as you're doing that, you are hitting these different checkpoints on the grid to increase the value of these location cards at the end of the game. But managing your cash flow is quite difficult, because at certain times in the game, locations are worth more or less. Sometimes they'll come with quite a strong bonus where you can hit off other checkpoints. You want to be making sure you're climbing this track to get some end game scoring as well. And you want to be making sure that you're not wasting money, because if you ever say get a big profit, but your cash line goes above the grid, then that's essentially money you've thrown away. So it's always trying to keep that perfect balance of cash with things you're buying, things you're selling, property you're definitely keeping, and trying to cater or tailor what you're collecting with the cards you've actually got. So I'm really impressed by this one. The more I'm playing this one, the more I'm enjoying it. It has a real economic feel to it, despite being boiled down into 2 simple mechanisms, buy a property or sell a property. And this for me is just ticking a lot of boxes for me, and I'm enjoying it thoroughly. So yeah, this one's going from strength to strength, and it feels so unlike anything else I have in my collection, which is always something I look for. So that is World Exchanges, a well-deserved number 1. So there we have it. That concludes the video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel. Apologies if I sound a little bit different. I have got braces in, which I'm going to have to get used to, so my speech is a little bit strange at the moment, but I'm sure we will fix that soon. As always, be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.